Army generals.
Shout out to Hate Army.
Your name is Hate Army? Saying Hate Army shit.
Hate Army shout out.
Good vibes to the Hate Army.
Shout out for hate.
What I like to do is a little segment about Memorial Day. Now, in the United States, Memorial Day means something different for everyone. As I already explained, the origins of the event are that we're supposed to take some time out to honor those who have passed away in the line of duty, those who were in the armed forces and, you know, were defending our country and sadly lost their lives. And it's an honorable thing. I absolutely support and respect the military. And I want to say thank you to anyone out there who watches my content and maybe has served in the United States military. That's very honorable of you. And understand that there are people who don't just live with blinders on and go on their merry way ignoring everything around them. There are people who are very cognizant of what happens in this country and know the reason that we can do what we do is because of you. So thank you so very much to those who have served. Very much appreciated, okay? So that being said, how do Americans celebrate? Well, typically on this day, you'd get together with family and friends and you would do things like cookouts, drinking, partying. Yes, I know that sounds silly, but usually it's an outdoorsy style activity. You usually wouldn't just sit indoors. You'd go outdoors and do something outside. And over the years, yes, I have done things for Memorial Day with my family. When I was younger, I used to go over to my godparents' house sometimes, and we would have like a big cookout there. Chicken, hot dogs, burgers, steaks, stuff like that with big sides and stuff. They had a nice big outdoor pool, so we'd jump in their pool and play there. Sometimes we would actually do an outdoor wiffle ball game where my dad or my godfather would pitch and all the kids would get up to bat, and they had a ginormous backyard, humongous backyard. And so you could play it and wail on that ball and send it flying into the backyard, and it was very fun back in the day when I used to do that stuff. As I grew up, didn't do that much anymore. Why? I've told you guys this. For some odd reason, there was a time period, and I can't even remember exactly when it was. I want to say it was like when I was a teenager. All my family started to have this big falling out. And I actually don't even know what the cause of it was because I wasn't involved. I'm a teenager. I have my own life going on. I'm working on school, and I'm working with my friends, and I'm playing competitive Street Fighter at this point. So I don't really care too much about family drama. But apparently my family had this huge falling out and stopped really caring about each other and stopped attending events and stuff. It was kind of messed up, actually, because I went from having what I would consider a big family to basically, no one talks to each other anymore. Really? What the hell happened? I really don't know because, again, I wasn't involved. And so it all just kind of ended. And I remember that then for Memorial Day, I'd basically just kind of stay home with my family, and my dad would cook out and get us some food, right, on his charcoal grill he used to have. So it was always good. Charcoal grills are good because you always get that little char flavor that you don't really get on other grills. But man, that was good when you used to cook up ribs and pork ribs. And my mom would like marinate and season them, and then he would put them on there. And oh my God, pork ribs are super duper good on a grill. Other things like that for the holiday. But then, as I got older and I got more heavily into competitive Street Fighter, the Memorial Day weekend changed for me. Because traditionally back in the day, Memorial Day weekend ended up being the weekend that they would hold a major Street Fighter tournament in the United States called ECC, which stood for the East Coast Championships. This tournament would traditionally be held annually, Memorial Day weekend, in Dunellen, New Jersey, at a video arcade called 8 on the Break. This was so long ago. This was before the era of playing video games on consoles for competition. This was arcade cabinet Street Fighter. And because this arcade was a large one, they were able to ship in cabinets from all over the place. Games such as Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Capcom vs. SNK 2, Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. Those were the 4 staple Street Fighter games. But then other games such as the Tekken series, eventually more console-centric games like the Dead or Alive series, stuff like that. The only thing we never really had there was Mortal Kombat, because at that era, Mortal Kombat had basically fallen out from the situation where it was competitive. Mortal Kombat 4 was essentially the last arcade-based Mortal Kombat, and when it went all console, it stopped being in competitive circles, all right? But Street Fighter continued, Tekken continued, and it was pretty funny, okay? It was pretty funny. I would say it was pretty fun at that time. So I started traveling around the late 1990s and early 2000s every single year annually to Dunellen, New Jersey, and I would actually carpool with a bunch of my friends. and fellow, Street Fighter competitive players. We would all jump into a car together, and we would drive down. Some years it would be in a car. Some years we went with my friend Scott Hovannisian, who I've talked about many times over the years here in my content, that he was kind of one of the big organizing guys in Connecticut, where I used to live. He would be like, hey, we're going to a tournament. I got a van, and we're going to drive there together. And he would have setups in the van of, like, TVs and games and consoles, so you could play Street Fighter on the way to the tournament in his van, which was unheard of back then. There was no portable gaming like that back then. And he was one of the people who would actually set this up. And then he'd be sitting outside of the arcade, parked on the street, open up the back of his van, and there'd be multiple freaking, TVs and setups with joysticks and everything set up to play right in the back of the van, which is amazing. You could find pictures and stuff like this. This was unheard of back in the day. So it was fun. We carpool. We'd actually share a hotel room together. And I've already told these stories over the years of various different funny things and antics that happened on our trips. But this was essentially my introduction to competitive Street Fighter. It was the East Coast Championships tournament series every year, annually, Memorial Day weekend, that we would, be playing these games competitively and get into the whole tournament mode. I actually remember it was one of the earlier years of Marvel vs. Capcom 2 being out, that so many people showed up. Now, here's the thing. Today, easily these tournaments bring in hundreds to thousands of attendees, correct? Back then, it was more grassroots. And since you were all in one small arcade, on average, a tournament would get maybe between 100, 200 entries. Sometimes you push 300. But if you had that many, you were really pushing it for time constraints. Because keep in mind, the whole tournament's being run on maybe 3-4 cabinets. That's it. So 3-4 setups. Keep in mind also, back then, because everything was played on a cabinet, there's potential that things would constantly break and have issues. It's not like you're playing on your own joystick. You're plugging in and out of a console. Everyone's using the same controls. When everyone's using the same controls, they break down. And this would happen all the time, right in the middle of a tournament. Oh, joystick breaks, buttons break, and now you got to swap them out, and you got to do all this maintenance work right in the middle of a competition. But I particularly remember one time, I can't exactly remember the entire situation, but I believe it was guys from this area of the country, Seattle, had gone to East Coast Championships. I think it was Rotron and his crew from Seattle came out to face the players from the East Coast, including Justin Wong and Ricky Ortiz and them. And I remember the tournament ran, I'm not kidding, over 24 hours without a break. It kept going. It just kept fucking going because we had to keep playing overnight in order to keep the tournament running, or else we would have ran behind and never been able to finish it. So imagine getting no sleep, and for 24 hours you're in an arcade and people are playing nonstop and you're running matches and whatever. And I was there and I watched the whole dang thing unfold. It was pretty epic. I remember the finals. I believe it was Rotron versus Ricky Ortiz. It was a crazy match. I think Ricky won in the end, but it was like super duper close. And I remember at one point Sanford was involved too, but I don't remember if Sanford was actually in the finals or not. I can't remember exactly. But it was one of the most epic tournaments that I ever seen, back in the day. And this is cool because basically it would run Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then when the tournament ended, usually around mid-afternoon to late afternoon on Sunday, everyone would travel home Sunday night and a Monday. So you would still be able to have a Monday with your family or friends for Memorial Day. So even though you played video games all weekend long, you got your tournament fix, and the results at that point would be posted on like shoryuken.com. Oh, here's the big winners or whatever. So you'd be getting some clout, and you get to come home and you get to relax at your other life. Because it really did feel like when you got into competitive Street Fighter, like this was one aspect of your life. But then on the other hand, you had all real life stuff going on the other side of the spectrum too that was different. That was separate. Like, who the hell cared in your real life that you went to a Street Fighter tournament that weekend and did well or sucked? Who gives a shit, right? You get together with your family or friends, and you're just going to have your usual food or whatever and just enjoy the holiday. They don't care about how many times you did an Air Hyper Viper beam with Cable. They don't care about your Touch of Death combos with DJ. You know what I mean? It's just, they don't give a shit. They don't even know what you're talking about, right? So, that was pretty crazy time. And that ran, I would say, all the way to late 90s through, like, the whole first half of the 2000s. I think it was actually, I want to say, probably around 2004, 2005. So we're talking maybe 5-6 straight years that every year I would go to ECC. Then, I actually ran ECC one year. Because the person who always used to run it, his name was Fee Long. He basically wanted to retire, or at least take a year off from doing it. So he did, and I ran it along with Josh Wigfall from New York City. We shared the responsibilities, kind of split them right down the middle. And we ran ECC that year, and that was the year that everything went console. We basically said, enough with the arcade cabinets. Everything's got to go console. So everything was on, like, PS2 or, you know, whatever the hot console was at the time, because it was before the era of Xbox 360 and PS3. And it was great running it. It was actually quite fun. Had a lot of fun doing it. Although after that, basically, if he wanted to come back and run it again, I was like, go ahead. You know, I like doing it for the year, but hey, you ran it for all those years. You got your year off, go on back and keep doing it. Eventually, it retired. Why? Well, a couple things. Number one, the guy who runs a on the break tournament or arcade, essentially, you know, kind of, he still has the arcade, I believe, but basically, you know, competitive fighting games ended in arcades. They just don't exist anymore. You can't really go to a video arcade and find competitive fighting games anymore. Fighting games went all console. So, essentially, we lost the reason to run it at the arcade. Why are you going to run a major tournament at an arcade when the games aren't played in the arcades anymore, right? It wouldn't even make any sense to do that. So what ended up happening was other tournaments started popping up and sprouting up that were all run at, like, a ballroom at a hotel or a convention center or, you know, university campus that has, like, computer rooms and stuff. That's where these tournaments started popping up. And they kind of took over for ECC. So over the years, ECC just kind of got faded out, and other tournaments kind of took over for it. Although there really is, to my knowledge, no major tournament on Memorial Day weekend anymore. Like, that weekend always had been reserved for ECC. And when ECC retired in the late, I think it was late 2000s or early 2010s, but I think it was late 2000s. So when it retired, that was it. Like, no one else said, hey, we're going to take over. It was more like, all these other tournaments already exist. It's good enough. So it's kind of funny. ECC was a really interesting part of my life. Those early, you know, those teen years into my early 20s, when I was heavily into competitive Street Fighter, it was always a yearly annual tradition. That Memorial Day weekend, you're gearing up with friends, you're getting into a car or a van or a truck, and you're, you know, driving away, and you're heading over to Dunellen, New Jersey to play competitive Street Fighter and have a good time with your buds and to see, you know, to face mano a mano, who's the best. Back then, there was no online play in these fighting games. You had to play in person, and this was the way to prove who was the best, and people from all different regions and walks of life would come. It was great because we had people from Texas, Chicago, California. The only thing we never really had were Japanese players. The Japanese never really came to the East Coast of the United States, mostly because the travel, right? If you're going to come from Japan, you're going to go to a California tournament or whatever. Why? Because that's right there on the West Coast. When you touch down, it's not a big deal. They didn't want to fly across the entire country to come to ECC. It's, you know, it's like double the travel. So that never happened. But outside of that, we even had Canadians one year, I remember. A Canadian team came down to play, which was really neat to have that big variety of players or whatever. So, pretty cool. But anyway, yeah, I mean, that was essentially what I used to do on Memorial Day. And then what happened is once I basically quit competitive Street Fighter, you know, Memorial Day just kind of became another day for me. You know, now that I'm a YouTuber, it really is just another streaming day. I don't do anything too special. I said to my wife, why don't we have hot dogs today? But she wasn't in the mood for hot dogs. We're just going to have leftovers today. I'm like, oh, well, it is what it is. You know, no big deal. But that's what happens in life is you get different phases of your life that are different. When I was younger, it was the family day where I cooked out, played games, you know, softball or wiffle ball, had fun with the family. Then that phased out. Then it became a major part of my Street Fighter career for many, many years there, ECC. And then that kind of phased out, and then it really never got picked up to be something else. So, but I'm sure everyone out there has a different story about Memorial Day and how they celebrate it and what they do for it. Maybe I'll ask you guys in a little bit for your stories, all right? But anyway, I hope you enjoyed mine. Thanks for listening. That's disgusting. Stop smacking your lips. Tipping me helps me more than anything.